Today is Wednesday.
A real British teapot.
Today is Wednesday, September the 12th in the year 2001, and I'm here speaking to my mother's cousin, Barbara Pratt. She is at her home in Damariscotta, Maine, and we're just spending the afternoon and hopefully tomorrow morning just talking.
Good family history.
Barbara, if you could just say your entire name and when you were born. Would you mind doing that? I can hold this if you want.
Barbara Fisher Pratt, born June 21, 1914.
Okay.
Talking about pictures.
Yes. I was really interested in knowing about your youth and what evidence in Academy Avenue. Can you tell me a little bit about, first of all, where did you
You sit close.
okay, there. That's good. Where were you born, Barbara? What?
Providence, Rhode Island. I think it was called Lying in Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
June 21, 1914.
Now, was your brother older than you?
Younger.
Younger than you. All right.
And he was born at home on August 27. I can't remember.
Yeah, where in Providence did you live? I mean,
We had 17 places.
17?
Yes.
My goodness, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So you did not live
No, the
on
one,
Academy Avenue. You lived in
no,
another.
when I was
Okay.
born, my mother and father lived on Smith Street. And my father was working for the Railroad Express in the Union Station, delivering and wrapping packages. I don't know when we moved from there. I have no idea. What I can remember is that we moved to, off of Hope Street.
On the east side, or?
On the east side.
Yeah.
I
Why did you move around so much?
I don't know. I have no idea.
So, like, if you moved that many times, it must have been almost every year.
Yes, it was quite a lot. Because I don't know. I think I had one job after the other. I don't remember many of them, but I was very... I remember that when we moved over to Hope's area, we were terribly poor. My mother had to cut down an old coat. To school, I didn't have anything decent to wear. And I was sorry, but you know. And then eventually, when my real memory begins, when I was about 6, we moved over to Adelaide Avenue, near Adelaide Avenue, somewhere. I don't know whether it was Surrey or what, but it was a flat that my grandmother owned.
Which grandmother?
This is my grandmother, Easterbrooks.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was halfway supporting Dad. And they got in an argument one day, and I was in the kitchen all. So I suppose I could find on my brother, and as many as I could get on myself. And I ran away to Aunt Edith, 6 years old.
Oh my goodness. Now where was Edith and Arthur?
She was living very close to our place on Adelaide Avenue, and I could walk there.
No, she was married at the time, Uncle Arthur.
This is when I was
All right.
6 years old.
All right, now I'm going to... Okay. Well, so I want to make sure it was being recorded. Okay, so you ran away.
And then she decided that was none of it, so she took me right and shamed me. So I had to go back home. And I don't know, I guess I was so upset that I don't remember what happened after that. But I guess I ran away from home again. But I was a very confused child because my home was really what people today call dysfunctional.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that I had a very happy childhood. And for the times that we were with, or Aunt Annie with the fence. Or every Sunday, Dad and Uncle Arthur were very close. And so we went over to Academy Avenue every Sunday for Sunday supper, perhaps, eat sometimes dinners.
Who lived in Academy Avenue? I didn't know exactly.
Well, Aunt Annie lived there for a while, and then eventually, and I can't tell you what time, Aunt Edith moved there after Aunt Annie went to Roslindale.
So, your Aunt Annie, my grandmother, after she was married, she lived there for a time.
Yeah, but before she was married, she taught school in Syracuse, New York. And then she taught in North Berwick, Maine. And I have a picture of her in North Berwick, Maine. So she had moved too around, well, not a lot, but for those days it was a lot.
But when she was married, then she went back and lived at Academy Avenue.
Yes.
And your dad didn't have a chance to live there at all. Then.
Oh no, he never lived there.
Yeah.
But my mother's mother, Fleur May Easterbrooks, sort of took over superintending the family. She really did. And because I was born on her birthday, of course, she made me her favorite and spoiled me terribly. I mean, she really did. So my childhood was a mixture of uncertainty, not feeling very safe, and sort of bolstered up by my grandmother Easterbrooks, who sort of took me under her wing. So from the time of the very early childhood, which I really have very little memory of it, except that it was not happy. I was fine because my grandmother would take me to Maine every spring, Memorial Day, just before school was out, and take me to Maine to her summer cottage in Ocean Park. She also, just before I really went to Maine, I have to interrupt it a bit, I joined the Campfire Girls. And the Campfire Girls had mothered me beautifully through those early years and got me a scholarship to go to Autonomy Club in Exeter, Rhode Island. So I had some really very happy summers at that camp. But then as I grew older, Nana picked me up and took me to Ocean Park for the summers, which was lovely.
Was it you and your brother?
No, just me.
Just you. So you really got special attention from her.
Yeah.
You needed that too.
My brother did go later, but he didn't have as much attention. He had nice attention, but he wasn't there as long a time as I was. But my Uncle Floyd would pick me up. First time I went with him, it was a sidecar motorcycle. That was a nice, fun experience. But Uncle...
You went all the way up?
All the way from Providence to Ocean Park. We stopped, I bet 6 times to have ice cream sodas. But he was a rascal. He was an absolutely delightful, wonderful man. I adored him. But he ended up in prison, and he was not a very nice guy, actually.
Do you know what he did?
He stole a car in Florida and tried to sell it in Providence. He got caught. No, he tried to sell it in Maine, I'm sorry. So he spent a few months up here in the Thomaston jail. But he was a delight. He was awfully rascally. But, so, I mean, there's one in every family.
Yeah. Keeps us talking is what it does.
But that's, those, you know, I remember that as really fun times. I didn't care he was bad. Oh, okay, that was fun though. And when he'd get to Ocean Park and he'd go up the stairs, he'd say, "Hi, Ma, codfish for dinner, please." She adored it because she spoiled him rotten.
Yeah.
And didn't like my mother at all.
She didn't.
And I've just discovered recently, working on the genealogy, I know now why. Because she had to get married.
And she was pregnant with your mother?
Yeah.
Oh.
Of course, I never do that. But that really didn't work very well because she hated her.
Oh, dear.
Isn't that awful?
That is awful.
Yeah, she was 3 months pregnant when she married my grandfather.
Yeah.
And I didn't. Of course, I didn't know that. I was
No,
a
of course
kid.
not.
Never occurred to me.
No. Do you have a feeling that your mother knew
I think
that?
my mother knew.
Yeah.
I think my mother knew.
Yeah.
I think she did. And I'm very sorry because I would have felt a lot differently too if I had known that. But there were times when I really felt my mother, she tried so hard, and she had Dad who was irresponsible. He'd come home with a new Nash Rambler or whatever, a Maxwell touring car.
What do you think he did that for?
Well, I know now why. Because in 1906, Grandpa Henry Fisher gave those 2 boys a car, one of the first cars in the state of Rhode Island. And they were playboys.
Oh.
They were both just both of them. And he offered them a choice of going to college or a life membership in the Shrine. So what do you think they did?
Life membership.
Of course, they had a car, they had a life membership, and they could play in the minstrel shows and do all the Shriners' fun stuff.
So your grandfather Henry really must have encouraged that.
Of course, he spoiled them. He must have spoiled them rotten.
Did your grandfather go on to school? I mean, what was he?
Well, I don't know about you, and you're not very comfortable.
That's all right. I wanted to be able to look at you. That's all. That's all right.
I don't really, I know something about Henry's schooling. His father, George, was born in Ely, England, in 1820 or 22. And at that time, Britain was selling cotton to the Flanders field people, and they were actually using the cotton and making worsted and sending the worsted back to England for all the uniforms and very wonderfully, British cloth exports, and they weren't making it. So the little town of Ely, which had been very profitable, where George and his wife Anne Hancock were born, were products of that weaving community. In 1822 it was prosperous. By 1840, when the Industrial Revolution began, it began to fail badly. And so my grandfather's father, George, moved up to the Midlands, to the mills. But he didn't go into the weaving building. He had a blacksmith shop. And he was a blacksmith. And that George grew up, actually, in the Midlands. And Henry was born in Derby. They moved from, when he was a young man, he moved from Derby to Manchester. Oh, wait a minute, I have to get a little mixed up. He was born in Derby, but Henry was born in Derby. Then Henry moved from Derby to Manchester, where he had his first job. That's not right. Where he was a toolmaker. And then they moved, I'm not quite clear of this, but there was a move from Manchester to Birmingham, where Grandpa Henry Fisher was a tool maker. Now that, of course, went with the business of exporting himself to America, and Providence was one of the tool centers of the world. But while in Birmingham, he met Martha Ann Boulevard. And before he met her, though, he had another wife, and I can't find the name of the other wife. But from one of the stories my mother had was that his first wife died in a thunderstorm of fright. Now that's just hearsay. I mean, I don't have any proof. I'm trying to find out if I can get the records from England by census.
Now, who told you that story about, how did you find
My
out?
mother.
Your mother.
Mm-hmm. So I'm sure that it's true. And she said that her name was Deborah. So I've got my granddaughter who lives in London checking to get the census out of the records in the records office in London.
I see.
So that's a puzzle. I mean, that's a piece that I can't verify it except from Mother's words. And Martha Ann was born in Aldrich, where her father was a shoemaker. And Harriet Chester, who was her mother, was born in Bathercombe in Torquay in the Cornwall, Devon area, Gloucestershire. And I have been there, and I've also taken pictures of her little St. Mary's Church, where she was christened, and I have her prayer book. But why they moved, how she actually went from there, I have no idea.
So obviously they brought her over to the United States.
They did, yes.
Was that a permanent move for her?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I know that Grandpa was married before. I don't have the proof of it yet. But I know that he must have met Martha Ann when he was working in Birmingham, because Martha Ann's father, I think, must have moved his business from the Midlands down to Birmingham, because I have her prayer book from St. Stephen's School, an Anglican school, where she went when she was 12. And when I was there in England with Dave a couple of years ago in Oxford, we also took the train to Birmingham, and I have a picture of the area, but of course it's now just all wasteland. It's all torn down. But I have a picture. Dave took a picture of me standing on the place where the St. Stephen's School was, and it was terribly interesting, really. And, so I have pretty much proof of that. So then I know that Grandpa Fisher, came to the States with the Mormons.
The Mormons?
In 1870.
He was a Mormon?
He was a Mormon.
Oh, I didn't know that.
They didn't call it the Mormons in Yulee. They called it, I don't know, Fundamentalist Church anyway. But then he went back to England, and somewhere his first wife he married and then died. And that I don't have any, I have no certificates of any proof yet, but I know that from what my mother said.
So when did he marry Martha Ann?
Well, he came back to the United States because he knew that it was going to be profitable to come where they were making tools. And when I visited, we have a cousin named Colin Fisher in Yulee. So when I visited Colin, the second time. The first time I went, we didn't get into it. No, I guess it was the first time. He said, well, wait a minute, I'm going to call my mother because I know that Anne and George went to England. And so he called, and he couldn't get his mother, but he got his aunt. Oh, yeah, Anne and George went to England. I went to America in 1870.
Yeah, all right, George meaning
Your great-grandfather.
your great-grandfather,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
and his wife.
So I know they came
Mm-hmm,
then for good.
mm-hmm.
He had made the trip with the church, but this was after that. Then he had Martha Ann come over from England, and they were married in 1881 in Boston, Massachusetts. And I do have that marriage certificate. I have George's birth certificate. I have Martha Ann's birth certificate. I've got the marriage. I've got their marriage. Not Martha Ann, but George and Ann. I've got their marriage certificate. So it's pretty well documented. Yeah. So then, of course, when he got to Providence, he, of course, got into the working with the tool and dye business. And he and Stanley White got together and invented a little gadget called National Ring Traveler. And it's patented, and I have the patent.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
Oh.
And they were really very successful, very successful. So I think they had a very happy life. I think Henry and Martha Ann were, George was I think he was the blacksmith to begin with. And I think they really had a happy family. He and Anne Hancock produced 7 children, I think it is. I've got the list somewhere.
Now,
But there was William, and William is buried in Swan Point Cemetery. And there was Joe, and there was Fanny. And Fanny lived in near Etta and the Windsors. You've heard of the Windsors. And what was her husband's name? I've got it. You have to look it up. But they were in Greenville. And I have a letter from one of the children that they went every Sunday night up to Academy Avenue to play the violin, the piano, and sing. So the Fisher family has really, I guess, always been pretty musical.
yeah,
That's where it comes from.
yeah.
And I was interested in
Now,
that.
When Henry and Martha were married and they were living in Providence, did they build that home right away on Academy Avenue?
I don't know whether they actually built it, and I don't know whether that's where they lived at first. But it certainly was
The center of the
center of the family.
Yeah.
And it must have been quite a while, because if these people, these relatives from, Fanny was a big part of the family. I think she was a disgrace. I think she got pregnant too. But in those days it was a disgrace. It's not true anymore.
Yeah, no, it's not.
No. But I know that they were very close. And, they must have been...
So his brothers and sisters, Henry's brothers and sisters, then did they all come to the United States?
I think they all did. I remember Uncle Joe Boulevard. That was her family. And William Boulevard. I remember Joe a lot because Mother said he ate peas on his knife, from his knife. I could, that impressed me as a child.
I know it. That's something I can remember things like that. Now, if Henry was doing so well and you were struggling, why didn't he help out with your dad?
I think he probably did.
Oh.
I think he probably did. Because we were very little kids, and I have no real memory. What they probably did is give him a car.
Oh.
I have no. But that's what he probably did.
Yeah.
I would suspect that what he did. But I have no memory of that. I just remember how happy it was to go to Academy Avenue.
Yeah, and you did this just about every weekend.
Sunday. Mm-hmm.
And that's probably why the Fishers all really like to get together.
Oh, they love
in
to get together. They have
reunions.
done it ever since.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And so it's been really, it was a very happy time to go over there. I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother and dad would stop squabbling, and it would be peaceful, you know.
Oh, yeah, and there were cousins to play with
and
whatever.
your mother and I and Henry, all of us, and Arthur's kids.
Yeah.
We really bonded. We had a very nice time.
Uh-huh.
And so the point was that we were bonded. So on Memorial Days, there were many years when they moved out to Roslindale, we would meet in Taunton for the fish run, and then have picnics and pick arbutus. It was lovely fun, and your mother and I just loved it. It was our first time out, and we played around on the sand on the beach, and it was one of those really happy memories.
I can imagine that with my grandmother Annie, your Aunt Annie, moving away really changed the family dynamics. Is that true?
Yes, very true.
Because you were, there was this ritual of getting together, and somehow you tried to keep that going.
It went on for a long time, and it was an anchor, for all of us, real anchor.
Yes.
But Aunt Edith sort of kept it up, and Aunt Annie kept it up for a long time.
Yeah.
Because I know the last time this whole family was together was at Aunt Edith's 80th birthday, and it was very nice. It was wonderful. Because even Henry was there. Henry and I left the log cabin at one point and just walked around the whole of the Corny area, just talking about our time. And I had a certain...
It's hard for me to imagine that happening with Uncle Henry. See, that is a very difficult thing for me.
Well, we had
you really did have a friendship there.
We had a real friendship, yeah, we did. And we met at reunions at Brown and would get together.
And he would be somewhat open?
Oh, yes. And this was, it was very difficult because he'd been married to Betty Cheever, and we went through all of that.
Yeah.
And it was hard.
Maybe they look to you. It sounds like that people really are drawn to talk to you. Is that true?
I think that was true. Yeah, I really do.
Because maybe Uncle Henry opened up to you, but
he did a lot.
Couldn't open up to other people.
And in fact, I called Audrey in Providence when I went to my 65th reunion this last June, and I really hoped I could see her because I know that she's not been very pleased with the Siemens family at all.
No.
And I'm sad because
why isn't she not pleased?
I am not pleased. I don't know what's wrong. I don't really know. And I wrote a note to John, and I've tried to get in touch, but they don't answer me.
No.
Nobody does.
And John doesn't either?
No.
Well, maybe John is hopefully going to come here sometime. His wife doesn't want any part of his family.
I see.
She is holding him back. That's what's happening.
That's what's happening. Well, I feel sad.
With John.
With John. I feel sad about that because, well, actually, Robert and David are the same age, and they had a good friendship going.
Okay.
Is it Robert?
Oh, Bob, yes.
Bob.
Robert.
Bob.
Yeah, right, I'm sorry.
And he is in sort of the same work that David's in.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't had any contact at
No.
all, not a bit. And I feel,
No.
I feel badly about that.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
The thing is, I think that John is at the point where he really wants to know his dad a little bit better, too.
He does.
Because his mother didn't talk well of him, of course. He doesn't, you know, she took John with her out west.
Yes, yes.
So he has a very skewed
I know he
vision
does.
of
Yeah.
his father.
That ought to be straightened out.
Yeah,
Somehow.
yeah, yeah.
It really should be.
Right.
But
So-
you know, I was involved. I mean, we were at Betty and Henry's wedding. We had a lot of good times together
Yeah.
with Betty and Henry.
Now, when you would go to Academy Avenue on Sundays, would the whole family sit down at a big table and eat together?
We made ice cream.
Well, I'm not surprised.
Of course. We churned ice cream up there in that little back room, pantry room in the kitchen.
So it was your grandfather Henry that would do that, and I remember doing this up
And
at
it,
Aunt Edith's
and it went on after Grandpa died. It went on all the time anyway, because they were always one of the family in that Academy Avenue.
Yeah.
And every Sunday night, whoever was there, we had ice cream and cake, all the bad things you should eat. Welsh rabbit, red bunny, all the bad things you should eat. That's what we had. And everybody stood around the piano and sang.
Dang. Yeah.
It was a real, you know, people don't do that anymore.
No,
they got
they don't.
they got television all the
You
time.
know, I think you were saying, I think that is maybe the stability of our family, that kind of thing. I feel that. I think you're right about that.
It's really been wonderful.
Even though everybody's had their differences and so forth, that, I don't know, there is that point of
Well, it's really,
something that you could count on. Something
it
that
sort
was,
of bonded the family.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's very good. The same thing has happened with Jim's family, too. It's now going, but it was when we were young. And so we've been very lucky to have that.
Yes, yeah.
So family has always been important
Mm-hmm.
to this day. I don't know how long it'll go on because life is changing.
We're all so far away from each other, which makes it very difficult, you know, in itself, just physically to have
Right.
contact, that
And
alone.
everybody's involved in different kinds of work. And the young generation that is right now, my grandchildren, are spoiled. They have, you know, we didn't have a lot of money, so everything was done with the family. So now what they do is they go to Mexico, they go here, they go there. And
Yeah.
that's not drawing the family
No,
together.
no.
And I think that's what's happening. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's going to reverse, but I don't know when. But generations go through this here. I mean, every generation. And Mother used to say, you know, we're in the process now of perhaps having a recession, another war. And I'm thinking about Mother now. I mean, she was a pretty bright woman in her mind. She used to say, well, every 50 years, you go down through history. Every 50 years, there's a recession, there's a war. And I've been thinking, as this has been going on today, Mother, you were right. And it's eerie. I don't like the feeling.
Yeah.
So it's sort of hitting me this very day when we seem to be at war. And we have gone through that. And Mother and Dad went through the First World War. So our parents, no wonder they let loose after the First World War. Liquor became acceptable. So they all had these, well, for that long while when there was a prohibition, they had these backyard liquor parties, gin in the bathtub.
Yeah.
That was true. Absolutely true. And
Now, was there drinking in the Fisher family?
this is what I'm saying. This is what happened to, I think even Edith and Arthur, though they are not going to say so, I think they had a few of those too. And I know that my mother and father got involved with a group of their friends who were their age, and after the war, they had plenty of gin parties. Yeah. They did.
Well, I know my grandmother, it was like, no, you didn't even say the word, but I remember my grandfather kind of hide, I think he used to hide.
And he had liquor all over the place.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it, because I'm not really sure, but I think he had a life outside the family.
Yeah.
I think he did, because he wasn't always home.
Yeah. Very secretive, maybe.
Very. And he was very stern.
Yes,
I mean, we would have those big dinners, the holiday dinners around that big table in Rosendale. He was pretty strong, and he didn't sort of loosen up.
What was he like, or maybe you don't know this, when he was in his teens and so, what kind of a personality did he have before he was married, I wonder?
I have no idea. But I know that when we had reunions at Onita's, at the log cabin, he would just be nasty to her. That soup is not going to be worth eating. You've let it sit too long. And I said, oh, Uncle Raymond, don't do that.
And what would he say?
He would make, she'd be making that lovely quahog chowder that we always had.
Yeah.
And he would dress her down, and I would have socked him.
Yes, yeah. But and my grandmother wouldn't say a word.
She wouldn't say a word. She never spoke, ever. I don't think that he was nice to her.
No.
I don't think he was. And I don't know why. I have no idea why. Because she certainly was loyal, and when he didn't make any money, she was making plum puddings and fruit cakes and selling them and trying so hard. I don't think he ever appreciated it. And I think this affected Helen and Henry.
Oh, definitely. Oh,
I really do. I think it was awfully hard on the kids.
Yeah. There was so much unsaid in their family.
And they were confused.
Yeah.
And when we had that last reunion on his, I said to Henry, it really was tough. Oh, he said, we never knew where we stood. So that's not a happy memory. That's really not.
When you tried to get a hold of Audrey when you were at your reunion recently, what did you speak about?
Well, I said, Audrey, I really want to come down, but I have no car, and I guess she doesn't drive way up there. So I don't think that I could make it. But if I ever get back to Providence again, I surely will. And she was very nice.
Oh, she was?
Yeah. The first time I called her from Florida, she was not. But then I tried again. And she opened up a little bit.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I'm coming to Providence, and if I can possibly do it, I'll get down to see you. And I was disappointed that I really couldn't do it. I didn't have time. I should have taken another day, and I could have managed it. Somehow my nephew would have driven me down.
I would have come up and got you.
But I didn't. Somehow I didn't.
No, you can't pack. You can just do so much.
But I didn't think about that at that point.
Yeah.
But if I get down there ever again, I will do it. So now we've opened up, and I will call her and try to open up the conversation. Because that's not good for her to feel that way. Not at all.
No. And the thing is, I think that she needs the appropriate person maybe to kind of
get it up.
I don't, because obviously...
Well, you know, we did sit with them at one of the Brown reunions. I know that some time ago, so we had met her.
Yeah.
And we had opened up a nice conversation. So she was, open to talk to me.
She didn't even call Dad when Henry died. Dad didn't even know that he had died. Yeah, it was everything is just so hurtful. I don't know where all that was coming from, but he was devastated.
Well, I'm sure he was.
Yeah. So I don't know. she has some bad feelings, I think, for, you know, our family for one reason
Oh,
or
I think
another.
she does. I think that's true, Aunt. I really think that's true. And I'm so sorry because you
Yeah.
hate to have that happen. Well, we had it in the Pratt family, too.
Oh, sure.
Jim's mother wouldn't speak to her sister-in-law for 35 years. And we went to Providence one year for Christmas the year Mother died because we were going to clean out the house anyway. And so I called and I said, all right, we're going to have a party. And we're getting Aunt Sophie and Uncle Mort, and we're going to get those women together. And we did.
For you.
We did.
You were so good.
Oh, it was ridiculous. Absolutely stupid.
You know, it makes me wonder the way you are, because you've come from some really hard struggles. That you're so nice.
But and to tell you the truth, I think that's why.
Why?
I really
Okay,
think
yep.
that I never was, you know, things were very bad as a child, except for Dana, who spoiled me rotten, but that's all right. So I think that makes me aware of what people need. And so, but Mother was like that. She'd bake a cake for somebody who was having a problem, sick or something. I bet she baked hundreds of cakes on that street, up and down. But she was like that.
Yeah.
And
So that's
and
the part of her
I
that.
think that's the good part of her that hit me.
Yes, I
you
think
know.
so too.
And you know, the very sad thing is, and this really bothers me a lot, she know everybody, my sister-in-law, Hope, will, no, she will not, she was afraid to go to see my mother. She would not go to her house. She thought she was crazy. And that just made me so upset. But I cannot convince her, you know, that Mother was not crazy. And of course my father, after they put her into the hospital at Howard, went off to the Caribbean for a cruise. And Jim and I, who had,
Oh my goodness.
well, the summer that she was so bad, and she eventually tried to commit suicide, Jim, God bless him, I wonder he ever married me, he was tutoring kids from St. George's School in Bristol, Rhode Island. And so he had to go down there, I think, 5 times every weekday for these kids. And so he would come by and he would put Mother and me into his car, his father's car, and drive us to Bristol. And he would go to the house, and I'd take over the car, which by that time I was driving, because he taught me to drive. And then I would take Mother around Colt Drive Cemetery, which is where her mother was buried. And we would visit the grave, and then we would sort of look at the pretty, sit on the bench, look at the bay, and it was so pretty.
Yeah.
And then Jim would pick us up. I would go down and pick up Jim, and we get in the car, and we go have some lunch somewhere. This was the time that she was so upset, and her upset was not manic depressive at all. I mean, it was not really a serious psychological problem. It was because I was costing so much money to go to college, and Dick was coming along, and my father was still buying cars.
Oh.
And she really wanted me to have the education, and yet she was torn between the education costing the money and Dad's extravagances. He was irresponsible for his entire life. Irresponsible. I hate to say it because we were all very fond of Dad because he was always so cheery and great. But he was always the end man on the minstrel show, always, and never responsible. Not from the time that Henry gave them their cars were those guys responsible. Our Edith had plenty of money, so she could take care of Arthur.
Oh, is that, I was wondering about that. I'm going to have to turn this over.
Okay.